Hello, BookTube. All right, we're back for this library tour, and we are doing the books in the fireplace. There's a filled-in fireplace here. We did the mantle, and we're doing now. There are two bookcases side by side here. It's a bunch of books, hundreds of books, and they're not in any order. And we're just gonna trek our way through them. So the only way to do it, I think, is to do the books that they're double stacked, and the books that are double stacked, the front stack, are miscellaneous and they're stacked sideways and they don't belong here anyway. And I think that rather than clear all those off first and then deal with them separately, I'm just going to do those first. So we're on to the next shelf, and we're not going to get to the books, the actual proper books on that shelf, until we've done these transverse books. So we'll start with those. Okay, and the first two are really good examples. They're old, but they're really good examples of what I often talk about on this channel. We mention things like the Oxford Very Short Introduction series, or those little books. I don't know if I have any here that were on. You saw them. You saw me open them a year ago. Tiny little things on jet lag or computer passwords. Just a little meditation on those, or even the Penguin Brief Live series. In all those cases and lots of others, I have always said that the worth of that thing, now that we have the internet, now that you have Wikipedia and 1,000 dedicated sites, you don't actually need a volume like that to give you an introduction to any subject. The only worth for me of those books is if the author decides to show a little personality, if the author decides that their book actually will be a meditation on their subject rather than just a recitation of the basic facts. And these are two examples of when that happens. We've seen other examples of when that happens. This series was from Fontana Books, I believe. But anyway, they're a multi-volume set on the British monarchy. And this is Christopher Morris on the Tudors and J. Plum on the first four Georges. And they are great. And so are all the others. There's one on the Stuarts, there's one on the Plantagenets, and then there's these two. And I think there might even be one on the Medieval Kings. There are two different series that are both very good. They cover the exact same territory. They break it up into about the exact same periods, but they're different and they're really good. And these are really good. These volumes have underlining all through them because the authors did exactly that. Because they decided, all right, well, this is a very basic brief. I'm getting a very ordinary check for it. So what I'm going to do is just infuse it with personality. Those are the two options that you have. You can either totally remove your personality and just assemble facts, or you can more or less keep some facts in, but infuse the whole thing with your personality. I much prefer the second. And it used to be that I was more tolerant of the first until the internet came along. And, I was more tolerant of the first because I kept thinking, well, what about the people who don't know the facts and who just want them assembled in one book? Then what do you do for them? And now you don't. Anyone watching this has access to the internet, and the internet is an endless amount of such recapitulation. So you don't need it in a little book like this. But publishers still do it, so they must think there's a need. Imagine having a very short introduction series that's gone on to hundreds of volumes, when all they are Wikipedia entries. Imagine that. Anyway. Okay, this next one is one of those prestige format, larger mass market paperbacks. This is S.M. Sterling, and this is I believe, a gritty modern vampire story. This is A Taint in the Blood, a novel of the Shadowspawn. Can't imagine what drew me to the cover. This is yes, eons ago, Homo Nocturnus ruled the earth. Possessing extraordinary powers, they were the source of all manner of myth and legend. Though their numbers have been greatly reduced, they still exist, though not as purebreds. I remember reading it and liking it, so I kept it. Okay, oh my. All right, these are old Timescape paperbacks. Some of you, Mark Richardson, but also maybe a couple of other people, will remember the old Timescape line of classic science fiction and fantasy that they were. At the time that they came out, I thought, all right, why are you wasting all this cover real estate on a big banner that says Timescape? Why are you wasting why are you wasting space on the imprint? But now, of course, they're objects of intense nostalgia because they were so good. You could, for $4, for $3, for $2, you could experiment with authors. You could buy a whole bunch of stuff. And this is one of my favorite science fiction and fantasy authors. This is M. John Harrison. These are two books in his pastel series. in his Pastel City series, the Tales of Veraconium is what Timescape called it. See, there's Timescape on the cover. This is A Storm of Wings and the Floating Gods, and they're set in the city of Veraconium, which is so old that it has outlasted its own memories of itself. And it is, I have learned over the decades, it is almost impossible to convey any sense of what these novels are like in a synopsis. It's almost impossible to do that. I don't know how you could do it. I know there is no way to do it. It's an incredibly old, decadent, and forgetful culture full of weird bravos and losers and addicts, and these are amazing stories. They are amazingly written. They are amazingly stuffed with amazing characters. I love them, and I have a publisher did a big Veraconium collection, that's a trade paperback that we'll get to. It's on these bookcases somewhere, but it's fantastic. It's beautifully made, but it doesn't include everything. I'm not sure, but it doesn't, like, for instance, it has a couple of novels and a bunch of short stories of Veraconium, but I don't think there's one of these books that it doesn't have. It might be The Floating Gods that it doesn't have. So I keep these mass market paperbacks, and I also snatch them up whenever I see them again, but I don't see them anywhere near the frequency that I once did. Underscoring my prediction from 10 years ago that mass market paperbacks of this type, vintage mass market paperbacks, are slowly going to disappear from used bookstores because no one's made them in 15 years. So they're slowly going to become an odd thing to see, and that's a shame. It's a real shame. I know for sure that if I were to come across a motherload of them at some bookstore, even if at the moment that I saw that motherload there were authors in that motherload that didn't interest me, I would snatch them all up. They'd all be $1. I would snatch them all up just to have them, because they're going to go away. And the science fiction fantasy industry is not all that interested in reprinting this stuff. So once they go away, they're gone. Anyway, what's the next one? Oh, look at that. Oh, it's a cute little, look at this, how tiny this is. Cute little book of Charles Lamb's books on essays on reading. This shouldn't be here. This should be in my, I'll set this aside. This should be in my, in the little book room on the shelves about books. So, but Lamb is great. He is great. I don't know if I need to say that. Probably I do. He is great. This is, of course, a tiny fraction of what he wrote. And he's really good on books. He's really interesting on... okay, this next one is tiny too. Oh, okay. All right. This is an old Avon classic of A Shropshire Lad by Wilson Shugart. This is just classic poetry to an athlete dying young and all the other things. That there's Wilson on the back. This is just a great little collection of poetry, just totally memorizable. I used to know back when all of my friends were your age. I used to know people who had simply memorized the whole of the thing, and it's worth it. It was, I thought, a little bittersweet. I thought that Houseman was gone completely, but then Peter Parker did a book called Houseman Country just a couple of years ago that did really well. It got reviewed everywhere. It made me think, wow, there are Houseman fans out there. That aside from Wilson Shugart, that's wonderful. And then, okay, all right, these don't belong here either. Oh my goodness. These are two old Georgette Heyer murder mysteries. Georgette Heyer, of course, is known for her Regencies. This is A Death in the Stocks and A Blunt Instrument, and she did a bunch of others. She's known for her Regency. She wrote a ton of Regency romances, but she really had the writing bug. Just in general, she was one of those people who needs to be writing a novel all the time, and the novels form in their minds. They have the process for working out the plot down to a fairly well, and so they always need to be working. And she was fond of murder mysteries as much as she was of mysteries, so she wrote quite a few of them, and I have a bunch of others. I found 3 or 4, I think, in Vermont, and they aren't with these, and they need to be, so I'll have to fix that. Okay. Okay, this is Ian Fleming's The Man with the Golden Gun, a James Bond novel that I found in one of those little free neighborhood libraries. When I'm walking Frida out and about, we will sometimes come across one of those little free libraries where it's a little box. You open the door and you take what you want, and you're supposed to deposit what you want too. But I never go out for dog walks with books in hand, thinking that we'll run across one of those things. So I'm a scofflaw. I've never actually contributed to one of these libraries, but I saw this in one of them and realized it didn't have any James Bond novels, and it's been forever since I read them. This is the one where the KGB brainwashes James Bond, and his own agency determines it immediately. They sense it immediately, and they take him in hand and try to deprogram him. Just atrocious stuff. But I wanted to read it again, and I do want to read all the others again too. But I'll be hanged if I'm going to go and buy new paperbacks of James Bond novels. No way. I'm going to get them in this form or not at all. Okay, all right. This next one is this is an old Pelican guide to good reading, and it's just all the genres broken down, and then the anonymous authors just opining on, making you lists of the top 100, top 50 books to read. These were a very popular kind of book once upon a time, especially in the post-war era, when you had a whole new generation of people wondering what they needed to do to be literate. They're mostly for curiosity's sake now for me. Because reading has gone on by 60 years, and also tastes have changed, and it's interesting to see what the people in this time thought was good reading. Just like I'm sure it will be in 60 years, the same curiosity will attach to books like 1,000 Books to Read Before You Die, where you look at it and you'll think, wow, they had this classic right there in front of them and they didn't even know it. But I don't know why I would keep any of them when I have the later ones. Okay, all right. This next one is Edgar Rice Burroughs. This is the Son of Tarzan, and it introduces Korak the killer, who is on the cover there, and he is unaccountably blonde. And I think I liked this just because I really do like the cover. I mean, Korak is blonde, and he shouldn't be, and he's way too old. But I think the cover is kind of pretty. Otherwise, and that's the reason why I have this as opposed to the black spine mass market paperbacks of Tarzan, which I have for everything else, including a black spine mass market paperback of Son of Tarzan. I kept this one, I think, for the cover. I can't imagine another reason why I would, although I really do like the Son of Tarzan. I think it's a really good, really enjoyable book. Okay, this is Claude Cockburn. This is his study of the bestseller, in which he looks at a bunch of, this is like half a dozen titles. He looks at a bunch of bestsellers of his day, which was about 100 years ago, which is why you have the Sheik on the cover here. Even though it sold like the Dickens, everyone wanted a copy of the book. Everyone read it in college. It was one of those books that people would hide inside another book to read, and it's totally forgotten now and would never be reprinted because of it grates against modern sensibilities in a whole bunch of different ways. So, but that's just one of the books. This is another one like this thing. This is another book where you read it. For me, the interest in it is the intense period interest of the author writing about these books, pretty much in the sense, in his understanding of books that are immortal. When he was writing about them, he was pretty much writing about them in that understanding, and they aren't. None of them have proven to be. So, what are you doing? Frida, what are you doing? This is the only thing that has food in it for you. Anything else you shouldn't eat. She's feeling a little bit slow. She doesn't like the heat, and she doesn't like the humidity at all. She doesn't like either one of those things at all. And it's not just a question of her not liking being out inside them. She doesn't like them existing. When it's hot or humid, it's very humid here today. It just takes the life right out of her completely. Anyway, let's keep going on here. We still have quite a few transverse books to do. Okay, we'll get a big block of them done now because these are doubles and whatnot. And wow, okay, wow, doubles, and in one case triples. Good, look at that, triples. This is an author that I really like. Obviously, since I have a pile of them, including triples. This is Roger Lancelyn Green, and these are mass market paperbacks. He was a myth reteller, the heroes of Greece and Troy, the tales of the Norsemen, the tales of Greek mythology, or Egyptian mythology, all that sort of thing. He does it in a wonderful way, wonderfully graceful, wonderfully articulate. These are just, there's even the high deeds of Finn McCool there as he goes into the Red Branch saga. Oh no, that's Rosemary Sutcliffe. Oh, what's she doing in here? No, this isn't Roger Lancelyn Green at all. This is Rosemary Sutcliffe. The High Deeds of Finn McCool. This is she's terrific. Those of you who know her, she's elsewhere in this room as well, but she's terrific. But all the rest of these are Roger Lancelyn Green, and he is reprinted in bookstores now. And I loved his book, Heroes of Greece and Troy, a compilation of his 2 books, one on Greece and one on Troy. And one of you found a copy for me and sent it to me. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. It's in the other room. Okay, this next one is a mass market novel that I don't think will ever be reprinted in trade. This is Taylor Caldwell, this time writing with Jess Stern. This is I, Judas, a historical novel about the Jesus story that's really good. Really, really enjoyable. I love it. I reread it all the time, but I have only ever seen it. Occasionally I see a hardcover, but I'm not going to get something like this in a hardcover. So I grab it whenever I see it in mass market because that's the only form I'm going to see it in. I hope, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's been reprinted in a trade paperback. A nice durable trade paperback would be great. If there was such a thing, I would go to Barnes & Noble and get it, absolutely. Okay. Talk about somebody who needs a reprint. And with the best cover art in the world, although I don't know how you can get any better than the cover art he had originally. This is the great Gordon Merrick. There's only 3 here. All the rest of Gordon Merrick is here in this room. This is his famous one, The Lord Won't Mind. This is his hit. There are 2 college undergraduates, Charlie and Peter. They are both gorgeous. They are both feathery blonde. They are both enormously well endowed. And they learn that about each other in about 2 seconds when they're brought together by their scheming matchmaking aunt. And there's this. I've got One for the Gods. I've got. I don't blame her for having that look on her face because she doesn't have a chance. And there's The Great Urge Downward. And believe it or not, these things were in retail bookstores. That was the amazing thing about Gordon Merrick, is that he seemed to be able to do this 30 years before he should have been able to. He seemed to be able to just be right. The phrase now is out and proud. He seemed to be able to just write these books. And there's very little in the way of pre-Stonewall comeuppance in these novels either. It's not like these characters suffer for being gay, which is a thing you often see in period gay fiction. It's very forthright and it can be very explicit, but it has a moralistic tone too, and the moralistic tone is anti-gay. It had to be in order to get past the censoring gatekeepers of the publishing industry, but Avon published these the way they are, and they did well. And you could see them in retail bookstores. The most amazing thing in the world at a time when there were still little gay pornography shops with no street signs and boards on the windows because otherwise they get rocks through the windows, and when people could be hauled into court or into psychiatric institutions. These came out at the same time as all of that. And they make for interesting reading. They're not high literature, but they are enjoyable. And all the more remarkable when you think about when they were written. When did The Lord Won't Mind actually come out? 1970. This came out in 1970. And the 2 characters never hide what they are. They're never ashamed of what they are. They never have any kind of internal conflicts about what they are. And what they are is gloriously represented on the page. It's not represented as, oh, look how these deviants can sometimes enjoy themselves briefly. No, instead, the Lord Won't Mind is a glorious world. It's the portrait of a glorious world that is not ashamed of itself at all. It's not a warped and stunted side reflection of the heterosexual world. It's just its own world. And for that to happen in 1970, when being gay was still a crime on the books in half the states in the Union, when families routinely outcast members, wow, it's still amazing. I don't often go back to Gordon Merrick to read for pleasure, but I'm glad I have those, and I have the others in these great old cheesy mass markets. I have all of them in this format. I just need to find them and put them all together. Then this next one is the old Penguin Book of English Verse. Much reinforced because I have used this many, many times. This is edited by John Hayward and has all the usual suspects, but I think that there's no harm in that. The choices here are really well made. So I keep it, even though I have lots of other later Penguin and other anthologies of English verse, and of course the Oxford Book of English Verse. I still keep this one because for a thing to stick in your pocket, it really can't be beat. Then we have historical fiction. This is Marcus Corvinus Mystery. This is David Wishart. doing a book called Ovid. Marcus Corvinus is his hard-bitten Sam Spade type gumshoe in ancient Rome. These are intensely anachronistic books. There's good research behind every one of them, but the characters all talk like something out of a Dashiell Hammett instead of the way they would. Corvinus is the prime example of that. And he's not, like all hard-bitten noir gumshoes, he's not particularly good at what he does. He's not any more observant than anyone else. He's not any braver than anyone else. He's not any purer than anyone else. It's one of the main reasons why I have very little patience with that whole subgenre of detective fiction. But these are still tremendously enjoyable to read. The energy that Wishart, it's not as easy as it looks. The energy he brings to the page is incredible. And this all deals with a legitimate mystery from the ancient world, which is what actually happened to the Roman poet Ovid. What actually happened to him that caused him to be exiled from Rome? That is a legitimate mystery. We don't know, and we never will know. And so people say history can't keep a secret. Well, there are some times when it can, and this is one of those times. And so Wishart just gets to have a ball with Augustus and Tiberius and Livia and a whole bunch of other characters, and just try and figure out what happened. So his guess is as good as yours. So, and then the last two are mass market paperbacks. They complete my collection. My collection is now complete of Stephen R. Donaldson in mass market. This is The Ill-Earth War and the Power That Preserves, Book 2 and Book 3 of the first Chronicles of Thomas Covenant the Unbeliever, which I am reading in the company of a bunch of other booktubers for the rest of the year. So we are, the book 1 in this series, the one before the Ill-Earth War, is Lord Fowl's Bane, and we're reading that for July. And then August will be the Ill-Earth War, and September will be the Power That Preserves, and then October will be the Wounded Land, and then November will be the One Tree, and then we'll finish up in December with White Gold Wielder. We're going to go through the whole Chronicles of Thomas Covenant the Unbeliever and see what we make of it in 2019. And the reason I have these separate is because I have multiple copies of these two books, and that's because these are my two favorites of the 6 of anything that Donaldson wrote. These are my two favorites. I think the Ill-Earth War especially has something really remarkable going on in it, and it'll be really fun to explore that with a group of other readers and with all of you along for the ride. That will be a lot of fun. So that is it. These are the transverse books for this next bookshelf. And next time, we will move on to the books themselves, which are a wild miscellany of things. We will move on to the books themselves next time. So I'll see you then. Thank you, Book 2.